My name is Rebecca Quinn, and I'm here with Cehak, who was our last lightkeeper at Sheringham Point Lighthouse, and he was there from
1987, from I think it was in September '87 that we moved out. Here I have to say, I have to correct you. I was not the last. It was my wife.
Your wife
Erika.
was the last
Yeah,
one?
she was the last keeper on the book.
Wow.
And what happened is that when Jimmy Bruton retired suddenly, they came to us because they knew that we have been experienced lighthouse keepers, and we have relieved for on many stations, and we have tried to keep the stations in the same way as they were kept. And that happened in '87 with Sheringham Point after Jimmy retired. Now we have moved out there, and it was a most wonderful time for us, because you see, the lighthouse service is normally organized in such a way that there's two families, actually two lightkeepers, which in most cases have family. So in this case on Sheringham Point, for reasons of the departmental decisions, we were only one, it was a one-man station, which to us as experienced lighthouse keepers, I will come back to that later, it was a almost ideal station, because we had to work on the station at 3 o'clock in the morning for the first radio schedule, weather report, and the last one was about 2 o'clock, quarter to 2 or quarter to 3, I forgot now. I think it was quarter to 2 later on, because it was with the summertime. But however, we had the rest of the day and night free to ourselves, and that was wonderful. And we had no other person on the station living with us. We have been lighthouse keeping since 1960. We started on Race Rocks, and after 7 years and a few months, we went to Entrance Island, and I stayed there for another 18 years as principal keeper. On Race Rocks I started as junior keeper, and we have learned in these years that the best way to get along with the other family is to stay out of each other's hair. Visits into the house was not, if I felt like going up for coffee, this was a no-no. You came to my house if I asked you to come. That is very, very important, because people cannot understand that this was not that people on the lights were unfriendly, but if you have two families on one either small island or the small light station area in the bush, if they are too close, if they come too close personally, there will be either bad gossip starting very soon, and that just leads to difficulties. So therefore you stay away. And out of this consideration, a one-man station, meaning one lightkeeper station, was ideal, because all you had to have is a wife or a partner which was with you happily, and in our case very happily. I must say that's all ahead of time if it comes to it. My wife died last year after 67 years of a very, very happy marriage, and of course I miss her terribly, and we were company to each other. We did not need anybody else in that sense. we had enough contact with the outside world when we went out on holidays, or when people came visiting from the department or from the working crews. So that was enough for us. And the department at that time, for labor reasons, could not employ me, which they would normally have done, because they could hire me only for half a year. As Sheringham turned out for us, we kind of began to fit into the community of Shirley, and even there to become a volunteer fireman.
Oh, really?
And we went out to one fire in Jordan River.
Mm.
And can you imagine me in that fireman suit? I could hardly wear this thing; is so heavy, and the boots. But actually, we could not do very much anymore. The house was practically gone. As you know, to drive from Shirley to Jordan River,
it's quite a distance.
Takes a while. So that is basically the story how we got into Sheringham.
Okay.
And when the first half year was over, then they have had to hire my wife, and therefore she was the one, because to my knowledge, to my memory, they automated officially the station, or de-staffed the station in June, I think it was the 24th of the next year.
1989.
88.
88?
88, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we stayed on because we liked it so much out there. And I suppose the department was happy to have still somebody living there,
Right.
to look after the place. Now, I've heard somewhere that there were concerns raised that we were actually hired without payment, which is actually true. On the other hand, if you consider that when we were living out there, we would have to pay rent, and I very, very happily accepted this rent, so to say, free rent, as my payment. And naturally I would have reported anything, and these people who were raising that concern were right in that respect, that I was hired without a pay. So, and we stayed all through 88, and then in 89 we experienced in late fall the making of the movie Lighthouse. On top of us and our house, I nearly stepped out into the nothingness when they suddenly had removed my stairs because they've changed the outside of the light, and they also have created a protective area for our for the bantam chicken, who which benefited us by being there. I have tried twice to steal 2 eggs of the clutch of one of the hens, and she came, looked at that clutch, and walked away, because I have marked the eggs, and I had to, out of 5 eggs, I had taken only 2, and I thought, didn't think a hen would think that she could seemingly count to 5, and there were 2 missing, and I'm not going there anymore. And later on I found that nest of that same hen later on in the bush, and I tried it again stupidly, and she again, I haven't seen that then. The first time I saw it when she approached the nest and wasn't happy with it, and the second time she did it with my presence, but she never got there, never touched that area. And but however, small experiences, and with the deer ate us out of our hand, they were becomes so tame. And we had a little dog at that time, a friendly dog, seemingly to the deer too, and the deer did not bother about her, and she was only between them, and they fed all around the place, and it was a paradise. And we were rather unhappy when we eventually had to move out, and we came back to town in 1990. So it was a wonderful place which we have experienced to live out there. Now, shoot with your other questions.
Okay, well, maybe we start with from the beginning, where you were born in Austria, and I think you said 1925?
1925, too long ago.
Too long ago? And so you obviously were there for the duration of the war, and then you left after?
Yeah, I have been called up in 1943 and went into the Air Force, and well, it lasted not totally of 2 years, until I was in prison on the end of the war in West Germany, and when the Americans had already crossed the Rhine, and I had the good fortune to be together with my brother, and we have been extremely close, much closer than other brothers we have experienced to meet in the services. We were usually, one was living this part and the other one was living that part of the company, and we were always close together. And the story was, if the Cehaks are here, the company is complete, because we have learned, if we were just staying back, it was better for us. That has also that wisdom has demonstrated itself in when we returned from the Eifel. The Americans were approaching fast, and we were quartered. The whole company of this unit was quartered in a school in a little town. I forgot now which one it was. And one of the boys was stupid enough and went out during the night and lit a cigarette. And one of the American patrol aircraft saw this light and happily dropped a little bomb. It was only a literally, I think 50 kilograms or something like that. But it just, by bad accident, it fell into the opening, into the window opening of the school, and the cellar's opening, and exploded down there, and everything else blew apart, but the roof went up and fell on top of the mess. And my brother and I had been, as usually, at the very far end, and we have not been quartered in this school, but we found private quarters. And therefore next morning when we came, no comrades left. Or a couple of them maybe were alive, I forgot now. But however, this was one of the reasons that we tried to separate ourselves a little bit.
Right.
So that is my experience after the war. I've met my wife in 1968, and we came, no, 68, I'm sorry, in 1946 I came home, and in 48 we married. I met her in 47, and then both of us, we decided we wanted to get out of Austria, because we were occupied by, in Vienna, and especially in the first district, we were occupied by all four of the Allied forces, and it was not exactly comfortable, and no occupation is nice. And on top of it, then the Russians had been kind of getting hold of in Hungary, and we felt very uncomfortable. we had by that time, then we had a child. He was born in 1950, and we decided to get out of Austria and applied to the Canadian
The Lighthouse Service?
Commissioner or whatever it's called, and that was situated in Linz in Austria, about 200 kilometers away from Vienna, and that was problematic to get there. On top of it, my wife was a cute little blonde, and to move through the Russian sector as a cute little blonde was very, very risky. And fortunately nothing happened, but I borrowed my father-in-law's car, and we had a spare tire. But first I had a blowout, and a little while later I blew out the second tire too.
No.
So we got her on the highway by the thumb, and we had a son along. He was about 2 years old, I think, 2.5 years old, and there were kind people who took her along, but then for bodily functions of my son, they wanted to get him out of the car, and but my wife refused until they crossed the river, which was the border between the Russian zone and the American zone, and eventually everything went fine. We had to wait until 1953 when we came to Canada, and we arrived on the 1st of July of 1953 here in Victoria. Again, a very, very long story. I think it would be far, far above that interview. But we came direct to Victoria. We didn't stop anywhere. And the church bells were ringing. And, you know, tongue in cheek, we thought the church bells were ringing for us. Naturally not, but
my first would be Canada Day.
that was, however, our welcome in Victoria.
Wonderful. And so then you proceeded into the Lighthouse Service shortly
No,
after?
no, not
or?
immediately, no. You see, again, I have to reach back a little bit in my past. I have acquired a diploma, a engineer's diploma from I would say a technical college in Vienna. I graduated in 1943, just before I was called up, and so I had a profession on one side, and then for reasons of what is the right name, of business laws in Austria, you cannot carry a business without a master leading it, somebody with a master ticket. My father-in-law happened to be the owner of an automotive repair place, and I noticed that since my wife was the only daughter, if the old man would have died, although the business would have come to my wife and her mother, but they could not carry it as business. They would have to hire a master, and the business was not big enough to carry a master and the family to whom it belonged. So therefore I said, well, so what, it's basically coming to us, so why shouldn't I learn that trade? So I learned the automotive trade as mechanic, diesel mechanic, and auto electrician. And I was just before making the master ticket when we came to Canada. And therefore I had the knowledge of automotive business. That is meant the European way automotive business is done. Because as we found out very quickly that things are entirely different than in Canada they compared to Austria. Now, I could not work as an engineer for a reason of total lack of English. I spoke practically no English. We did go to English class from the first week, but this doesn't make me speaking English. You know, it took me about half a year before I began to think in English, and from that time on I could begin to speak. But what happened is, when I tried to find a job, any job, the gentleman who greeted us in Victoria from the immigration was a nice young man, and he had a friend who was the foreman in auto body shop, and he talked to Ken and he said, "Ken, I've got this kid from Austria, you know, can't you hire him?" So Ken hired me as a helper, as a auto body man helper. Now, auto body business was so totally different that you almost cannot compare it to the way it's done in Austria. The outcome is the same, but it's done differently. And what is the striking part on it is that the wages, the journeyman wages at that time were $1.75, and they paid me $1.50, and I tell you, I was not worth 25 cents. But this happened to me, and that was a good luck. Here I have to say, actually, the first job, just strikes me now, the first job my wife had was when we arrived basically on the same day, and the last one she had, the last job we had officially with the department was also her. So when we arrived in Victoria, not speaking any English and just having a guiding address for people who lived in, or we thought they lived in, on May Street. And we have made the acquaintanceship of a Czech naturalized in Britain, who we, even as non-English speaker, could recognize the fact that his English was so broadly intertwined with Czech, with his Czech accent, that we were wondering that it was English. We, even as non-English speaker, but however he did speak English and he understood. Now, when we arrived, we went with this Czech into a taxi, and all four of us went, or three of us, we went to May Street. And there we found out that these people had moved out. And as you are aware that if he did not, the person didn't leave any forwarding address where he used to live, people there didn't know. And that happened. And this taxi chauffeur had a smart cookie. He brought us to the Lincoln Hotel, which was situated on Broad Street, just beside Robbins, the little walk-up hotel. And when we walked up there and entered this little office, the manager asked the Czech, as the English-speaking person, if he wanted to manage this hotel. Now, the Czech asked my wife if she wanted to do the chambermaid. My wife said, yeah. So, the instant this man walked into his private rooms and came out with a suitcase and his wife, and they were gone.
Oh my gosh.
So the Joe was his name. He was the manager. My wife was the chambermaid, and we lived for free. The first night we lived in the same room, and then Joe moved out, and we had a room with a little hot plate, and she got $20 a week. Now $20 at that time was sufficient for us to live on, and we could even save $10. We saved half of it. You know, it was for us. You know, in Vienna you could get oranges during the winter time, and in July, oranges impossible. They were just not here.
Right.
And so our life was amazing. And after I think 3 weeks it took me until I got this job at Gladwell Motors. That was the name of the outfit.
Mm-hmm.
I even got a car. I got a used car. Beautiful old Graham. Nobody knows them now. It was a coupe, which was just enough for the two of us with the kid, a small, very small child at that time. He was 3 years. He turned 3 years a couple of weeks after we arrived. And as a matter of fact, he had his birthday yesterday. And so we did well. And I read home happily that everything was fine. My father had sold a piece of property he had, and that was just enough to give us the money the Canadian Commission demanded for me to have in Canada in a bank. They wanted me, if I wanted to take wife and child along, they wanted me to have $300, which at that time was far, far more than it's now. And at that time it was against the law to take money out of Austria. And however, this guy in Kunert, so the shipping line I came across, they said, "Oh yeah, I'll do that for you." Of course, a black market business under the table. And as an identification, I got half a page of half a piece of business page, which proved that I was the person with that money. And nothing happened for weeks and weeks. And then my brother wanted to come, and he needed that money too. So I wanted to get this money back, and I wrote to this gentleman, if that money wasn't coming soon, inside 14 days, I think I wrote, I would go to the company and would complain about him. And about a week later, a check came into the mail, because the arrangements was to have this money in the Royal Bank in Quebec. Now, it was not said Quebec City or province, and of course little did I know the basic difference between Quebec was for me Quebec. So, and as it turned out, this money has not been in Quebec, in the Royal Bank, but in Vernon, in Vermont.
In Vermont?
Yeah, and as it turned out, this guy had a little business on the side. If I wouldn't have squawked, he would have had this money. And however, that's the way things turned out. My brother came later on in the year, and he also made a good life here. And sadly to say, he died much, much too early. He died in 83, I believe. Yeah, 1983.
Okay, so then you were at Race Rocks, was that
Yes.
your first station, and you were
Yes.
the junior keeper there?
Yes.
And you were there from 1960?
I started on October, I believe October the 5th in 1960.
And you were there for?
I was there until early January 1968.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 7 years.
Okay.
Years and some.
Alright. And so from there then you went on to the
Entrance Island,
which I imagine that must have been that's a pretty remote station,
No,
isn't it?
no, it was not remote. I would call it only semi-isolated, because we had a boat. We went to Gabriel Island, and from Gabriel Island to Nanaimo. So we could go for our own groceries.
Oh,
We
okay.
decided that was much more desirable than on a race where we had to order it, because the race was not dependable enough that we could go, particularly in the winter time, that we could go and get it ourselves.
Right.
But we could have possibly too. We also had a boat, but it was organized in such a way that we had to order it on race.
Okay. And then they bring it in by ship, usually?
Yeah, well, that came by boat, by governmental supply boat.
Okay. So when you were in Sheringham, did you have to do that as well?
There was no supply from the department. We were on shore,
Okay.
and we had time enough to go in the afternoon to do our own shopping.
Oh, good.
And basically from Sheringham down to Zug is, say, a half an hour drive.
Right.
So that was no problem.
Okay. Good. Then you retired from
I retired from active service in 1985 in October. So I made my full 25 years as a lighthouse keeper, and I served. I think the last station was in 1996. That was as relief keeper, and that was out in Pacina Point.
Pacina, okay.
Yeah.
So you were at Pacina, you were at Sheringham, you were at Race, Entrance?
Yes, and I was up on Keynes Island, and I was farther down here. I was on Chrome Island, I was on Sisters Island, I was on Balinas Point, and I was on East Point as well. Always only short time relief, but all these years until 96, I was more or less happily relieving for other people who needed to get out or were sick.
Right. That's amazing how many stations you must have seen. Which one was your favorite?
Well, I would say there are two in the race. One is Keynes Island, which is, although that is isolated, but I think I would have to say Puerto Pass on Galiano Island, on the north end of Galiano Island, between Galiano and Valdez.
Is that, I'm afraid I'm not actually familiar with that station, is that?
That is
fairly north?
A station which is actually very interesting. It contains two aids to navigation. One is the light, which is the passage itself, and the other one is a light which is used as a the word escapes me right now, but when you line up these two lights, you are in the right channel.
Oh.
You know, it's organized in such a way because it would be difficult to, as the situation is, it will be difficult to have the two lights without any meaning to each other. So these two lights were just giving you know, if you line them up, one was higher and the other one was lower, you could do that wonderfully.
Wow, that's
and
really
for the surroundings and for the how the light was organized how the station was. I think this was my favorite. As a matter of fact, both my wife and I had decided that our ashes were supposed to be deposited there on one particular beauty street.
Wow. You still intend?
Yeah, well, I just held on to the ashes of my wife yet. I'll let my son decide if he wants to take it up to his place or if he wants to deposit it there. I don't know yet.
It's beautiful. Let's see, what's your favorite memory of being, let's say, start at Sheringham? What's your...
Well,
do you have a particular one?
What made me happy about living on the lights, you had to do your work. You do your work, whatever you are employed at or what your targets are, and that was on the lights as well. You had to do your work, and being away from the boss and have the boss showing up only say twice, maybe 3 times a year to inspect the place and look what goes on. This is nice because you don't have to have the boss sitting on your back day and night.
Mm-hmm.
That is nice. And then I have all my life I did not ever, especially in the time that I've spent most of my working parts in the city as a bodyman, and as such I've made the experience that I put my heart into fixing up a car. The guy takes it out, goes around the block, and the whole works comes back and smashed up again. So I had all that work that I had put my heart in it to make it nice again and functional. And that is the end of it. And I found it was useless. That work I did, I produced it was senseless. But on the lights I had the feeling from the first night on that I have provided some service to Canada, to the shipping, to the boating, to little small boating, which was meaningful, which helped somebody. And that was to me extremely satisfying, an experience which I could be proud of.
It's wonderful. It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. I've got a question. You mentioned the film Lighthouse was being filmed. So do you know what happened with that? What happened when you were there?
Sadly to say, as humanity is, I'm still shocked by the fact that this, it was only the stuntman who did it, but that the hero was supposed to jump out of the light for reasons of the book,
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the guy did not jump to his death. He was jumping onto a great pillow. The pillow was about the size of that room and maybe twice as wide. That was about the size of that pillow.
Wow.
But if you are 100 feet up and you have to get through the window, which needs a certain amount of physical effort, how to judge that, how much effort do I put in that I don't overshoot that window, that pillow on the ground.
Right.
It was a serious risk, and there was safety. There was a boat was ready to immediately supply support, and there was I think two emergency vehicles, and that scene was filmed at a lunchtime, and the people of the company, they were sitting down and eating and waiting until this guy maybe jumped to his death. It is shocking to me, to my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, it was about only 2 feet that he missed this target.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was just
It was
2
so
feet
close.
inside, yeah.
Oh wow.
It was, on the side, pillow that size.
Right.
If you miss 2 feet more,
Yeah.
you have it.
Oh dear.
So that was my impression of the main impression of the film. We did, however, learn that how movies are made, and it somehow spoiled our enjoyment of a movie. For instance, there was one scene, there was a love scene in the rainforest with a little campfire, and the two lovers were supposed to smooch and be happy on that campfire, and you could hear the cameraman saying, "Hey, I need a little bit more light," and the guy supplying the, what do you call it, the scenery, turned the gas up a little bit and the fire came up. You know, but if you have learned basically that is what a movie is made, so it's all so false. And although I realize I have known it before that it is all false, but I have seen it, and from that time on it has entered my system, and movies to me are not the same anymore.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So did you ever get to see the movie then?
But I have not been able to see it because the company and the union had disagreements, and the movie was finished, or not. It was not finished, but filming was interrupted at the very end, and the company disappeared in a hurry, left dead all over the place. Surely bed and breakfasts were not paid, and the hardware store in Zug wasn't paid, and nobody was paid in the neighborhood, and neither was the union. But the film company tried to finish it on the side. They have put stand-in and not direct shots of the people, just distant with the back of people who looked almost like the actors, and it was supposed to be on the market. I have not been able to acquire it.
What was the scariest moment for you on
scariest? I have no scary experience. Oh, no? Yeah. We had a fire. We have a chimney fire on Race Rocks at one time. The difficulty on Race Rocks was, for this particular fire, that the downwind side of this fire also had anything falling off that roof would have hit the gasoline shed.
Oh no!
And that was the scary part. As for the rest of it, we could contain it. You know, it was not that bad in that sense. But it was a scary time. But the biggest problem we had, I've mentioned that, was personnel. The relationship between the people on the station. If you can imagine that you have two men who work together, they have to get on. This is only the smallest part. Then you have usually two women, they have to get together. Then you have kids, possibly, and then you have dogs and cats. Now, if this whole bunch of people on the station are compatible, or reasonable at least, life is a paradise. You're away from the boss. You have basically most of your life's need supplied. We did not have to pay and didn't have to worry about electricity, and heating oil was supplied. We had to do our duties, and that was sometimes a little cumbersome, but that was all fine. But it was the personal relationship between this group of people. If that was good, it was a paradise. If it was not, it was a problem. You could have alcoholics, severe alcoholics. You could have pathological liars. Really pathological. This was unbelievable. Found out that this person couldn't even read or write.
Oh my gosh.
But he has worked his way into the department by a method which he told me at the beginning when the situation was still good. He bandaged his right arm and went to that test and said, "See, I'm sorry I have damaged my. Can my wife fill out this form?"
Oh.
You wouldn't think of it.
No.
But this would be a method of a person who cannot read or write to answer it.
Right. Wow.
And I've actually caught him when he approached the radio room, which happened to be in my porch, with a little slip of paper where his wife had written down the weather report, because she has been learned that too, and entered into the logbook to pass on to the station. And I said, "Well, Mike, what's that?" Oh, he said, "I cannot read and write." He confessed to me at that time. But however, it is a sad story. You can have this, you can have, I'm sorry to say, religious nuts. I had one family that came on Sunday morning and prayed and sung in front of my house about the sinners we were. It's unbelievable what you can run across. Situations where you as a normal person in society don't even dream of, that you have to live with them together.
Right. Yeah. I mean, such a specific situation to be in.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. No, the problem is that usually your stations are isolated, or at least semi-isolated, and you have nobody to talk about.
Right.
This, because if you talk to anybody, it will come back to them, unless you have, I don't know, talk to a priest or what, but it's extremely difficult to get rid of your problems in that respect. So in my case, I had it very, very, I wouldn't say easy, but I had it very good, because I had a wife which not only was totally on my side, but she also had the understanding that the circumstances were such, and we had to get through that. So.
Well, that's very fortunate then.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. I want to shift gears slightly. And talk about Sheringham's automation.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had any ideas where the final lens that was in there went.
When we moved out to Sheringham in '87, they have been working on the automation already, and what they did, they installed the fog detector, which is a machinery, equipment which detects fog and turns on the fog horn or the fog alarm, and they also had tried to get away from the light being lit by high-powered city electricity. They were working on putting solar-powered lights up there, which was usually with decreased power, but try to do the same thing. And all this equipment has been installed, and as you can imagine, this was not the only work they did. They did it all over that, because at that time automation was still very, very much on the heart of the department. Later on then, the resistance to automation on the West Coast has been such that they eventually saw the light and quit the automation. And we still have, I believe it is 27 stations we still have on the West Coast, which are staffed. Whether we had, I think it was 45, I believe.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's a fair number.
We have kept quite a few of them which were staffed.
Right.
So that is actually all I can tell you about what happened with the automation, because any closer details in the first place I don't really know. and secondly, you wouldn't understand it, or the people who hear afterwards or read afterwards wouldn't understand it either.
Right. So was the rotating lens, was that still in the tower at the time, or was that removed?
Yes, that was still up there.
It was still there?
Yeah.
And was it there for the duration of
that was still here, yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, for the film, interestingly, they made me the lighthouse director. Was supposed to show up in the credits. They needed, for their filming, they needed a different kind of green, which is the color of this light. And if I, in my lighthouse keeper experience, considered that the weather and total condition would not make it important for the operation of navigation or navigational needs, to have this particular green, I was allowed to have to make a change to a different. I could change the lens.
Really?
So this is one of the things which, of course, here too, when the company went away, they left, owed me $500. But however, I have done this a couple of times for helping them for the filming, for scenes where the light itself was somehow involved in the scene.
Wow.
So
I didn't know you could change the lenses. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Huh.
The color, it was only the color, it was only
the
coloration of the lens. It was not the total lens. I could not change that.
So, but just the.
Yeah, that was a small part of the light equipment which was colored.
That's really neat. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah.
Wow. Well then, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
You're so welcome, and I thank you very much for your interest in this dying out breed of people. Because sadly to say, even now lighthouse keepers are not the same anymore than they used to be when I started. And this has been late already. I was told, oh my God, you're coming at a time where everything is done already,
Well,
and
it's a changing world.
And this is only 50 years back.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you had an amazing career in the lighthouse.
Thank you very much for your interest, and keep up the good work to investigate and report on our lives.
I shall do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.